English literature after 1790 can be divided into three main periods: the Romantic era, the Victorian era, and the Modern era. Throughout English history, key events occurred that triggered the start and end of each literary era. In 1789, the French rebelled against their monarchy. Suddenly, people of England began to believe that freedom from their own oppressive government was possible, and the Romantic era was born. During this time, English people praised the good of the individual, revered nature, glorified everyday happenings, and appreciated rural living. The Romantic period ended when Queen Victoria took the throne in 1837, ushering in the Victorian era. During this time, England was alive with progress. Industrialism rushed over England like a wave. Women began to pull away from traditional gender roles. The population skyrocketed. England budded so many colonies, by 1890, 1 in every 4 people on Earth were under the rule of Queen Victoria. When Queen Victoria died and King Edward VII came to rule in 1901, Victorianism ended and the modern era took hold of England. Not too long after the beginning of modernism, England entered World War I in 1914. The war turned England on its head. The boys and men went off to the trenches, and the writing that resulted was often reflective of the horrors seen there. The women were forced to take on the role of the men back home. After the war was over, the English people questioned their place in the world. The writing that came out of England after these key events is highly reflective of the effects they had on England. In the Romantic era, poets veered from the rigidly structured sonnet form. Poets and other writers often wrote of topics that glorified the commonplace and other everyday happenings. Mystery and elements of the supernatural often occurred in literature during this time as well. Writers frequently used nature as a symbol of goodness, praising rural life and deeming urban life corrupted. Likewise, children were seen as symbols of natural goodness and intrinsic innocence. Often, writers focus on memories and they write of the powerful emotions memories can evoke within people. Some of the most popular writers to come out of the Romantic era are William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, William Blake, Mary Wollstonecraft, Percy Bysshe Shelley, and John Keats. Wordsworth and Coleridge are both notable essayists and poets of the time. William Blake is known for his poems, as are Shelley and Keats, who were close friends. Mary Wollstonecraft's essays on women's rights played a huge role in starting what is known as the feminist movement today. One poem that exhibits many characteristics of Romantic literature is Samuel Taylor Coleridge's Frost at Midnight. Coleridge is the speaker in this poem, and he's writing it to his infant son. In the poem, he's up late at night rocking his son to sleep. As he rocks his son, Coleridge notices a piece of soot dangling on the mantel in front of the fire. He sees the soot as a supernatural element that means an old friend will soon visit. This thought takes him back to memories of his childhood attending school in the city, which he didn't enjoy. Memory causes an emotional outpouring from Coleridge, wishing his son a life surrounded by nature, never having to live in the city for fear he'll be corrupted. Coleridge wrote the poem in 74 lines of blank verse, which doesn't align with sonnet form at all. All of these characteristics in the poem reflect elements of Romanticism. Coleridge includes his son, who is an infant and symbol of innocence. The soot has supernatural meaning. His memories elicit an emotional response, and he praises a life of nature for his son. When Queen Victoria took the throne in 1887, writing began to focus on societal reform and progress. Since industrialism presented the people with different opportunities and roles, many people found themselves questioning their purpose in life. New scientific advancements caused some people to question faith in God. Usually, the writing in this era was focused inward. It dealt with emotions. Authors experimented with various meters, and the dramatic monologue became a popular method of writing. John Stuart Mill is known for writing about philosophical concepts during the Victorian era. Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Robert Browning, who are married, are both Victorian poets, along with Alfred Tennyson and Matthew Arnold. Charles Dickens is known as a novelist, poet, and periodical producer. In Memoriam by Alfred Tennyson is a poem that Tennyson wrote over a period of 17 years as he grieved the death of his dearest friend Arthur Henry Hallam. Tennyson and Hallam met while at university, and in many ways they influenced one another's writing. In Memoriam gives readers an introspective look inside the mind of Tennyson as he works through his emotions regarding Hallam's passing. Tennyson questions if God had any hand in taking Hallam at such a young age, and if so, why would he do that? He also thinks about the purposes behind life and death. Introspection, questioning God, examining emotions, and pondering purpose are all characteristics that are typical of Victorian writing. The modern era began peacefully, but it was changed forever when England entered World War I in 1914. The war cast a veil of uncertainty over England and English tradition. With all the Englishmen facing the horrific realities of trench warfare and their wives, daughters, and mothers working to support the war effort back home, everyone in society was forced to take on a new role, and many people lost their sense of identity. Suffering through the war also caused many people to lose faith in their religion. The writing that comes out of this era is reflective of that lack of identity and faith. The writing often carries a pessimistic tone and focuses on happier times in the past, before the war struck. On a lighter note, since the war caused women to take on more important roles than ever, huge strides were made in women's rights, such as gaining the right to vote and own property. This gave women more access to the materials and circumstances they needed in order to create as writers and other artists. William Butler Yeats is a modern poet famous for his writing about the Irish Rebellion. Virginia Woolf is a famous novelist whose writings reflect a passion for women's rights. Her works help build the cornerstone of the feminist literary theory. Joseph Conrad is famous for his novella Heart of Darkness, in which he takes readers deep into the Congo and shows the horrors of colonialization. Friedrich Nietzsche and T.S. Eliot are famous poets, and Oscar Wilde is a well-known novelist and playwright from the modern era. Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf is an exemplary modern novel. Clarissa Dalloway has done everything by the book. She married a reliable man with a good reputation, started a family, and is to host a party. However, this wasn't always the plan. She fondly looks back on her youth spent at her summer lake house with her friends, free-spirited Sally Seton and the exciting Peter Walsh, who she once loved. Sally and Clarissa had big dreams to never get married and fall into the traditional role of a woman, but ironically enough, that's just what both of them do. Still, Clarissa wonders what her life would be like if she married the sensational Peter Walsh instead of Richard Dalloway, her safe choice. All the while, another man in London named Septimus Smith is dealing with the case of PTSD from fighting in World War I. He is completely emotionless in response to the world around him, and he often hallucinates. His wife, Rezia Smith, doesn't understand his illness. Nobody does at the time, even his doctors. Eventually, Septimus kills himself. The novel is written entirely in stream of consciousness style, which allows Woolf to show readers what is really going on in characters' minds while keeping it an illusion to the rest of the characters. The ideas on liberation from gender roles, focus on the past, confusion about identity, surface illusion, and stream of consciousness style make Mrs. Dalloway a traditionally modern English novel. Through every literary era, England has been a leader in setting the standards for successful literature. For more information, click the following links to be taken to educational videos on each literary era.